I survived on cheap ramen in my dorm room, calling home only to have them hang up on me. Now they show up at my door, asking for $50,000 to fund their luxury European vacation. They think I'm still that weak girl who begged for help with rent money 7 years ago. They think I'll cave like I always did. But they have no idea what I've become, what I've built from the ashes of their abandonment. They're about to learn that some debts can't be forgiven, and karma doesn't forget an address. My name is Rachel Monroe, and I'm 32 years old now, sitting in my Cleveland office overlooking Lake Erie. But this story begins 12 years ago, when I was just another hopeful 20-year-old stepping onto the campus of Case Western Reserve University with dreams bigger than my bank account. The Monroe family looked perfect from the outside. My father, Richard Monroe, worked as a mechanical engineer at a manufacturing firm downtown. My mother, Patricia, maintained our suburban home with the precision of a military commander, always concerned about what the neighbors thought. My older sister Stephanie had graduated from Ohio State with a business degree, immediately landing a job at a consulting firm. We lived in a 4-bedroom colonial in Shaker Heights, complete with the manicured lawn and the 2-car garage. Anyone looking at us would have thought we had it all together. But appearances were everything to my parents, and I was the crack in their perfect facade. While Stephanie followed the prescribed path, business school, corporate job, engagement to a lawyer by 25, I wanted to study interior design. I saw beauty in spaces, potential in empty rooms, stories in the way light hit a wall at 3:30 in the afternoon. My parents saw it as frivolous, impractical, beneath the Monroe name. We'll help you through college," my father had said that August evening before I left for school, barely looking up from his newspaper. "But you need to be reasonable about your expectations. Rachel, we're not made of money." I believed him. God, I was so naive. I watched my friends' parents co-sign loans, send care packages, show up for Parents' Weekend with smiles and credit cards. Mine. They gave me $200 that first month and acted like they'd handed me a fortune. By October, I was working 20 hours a week at a campus coffee shop, the smell of espresso permanently embedded in my clothes. By November, I'd added a weekend job at a retail store downtown, taking 3 buses to get there because I couldn't afford a car. My roommate Emily would come back from dinner with her parents at fancy restaurants in Little Italy while I rationed a box of ramen to last 3 days. The calls home became shorter, more strained. My mother would spend 5 minutes talking about Stephanie's promotions, her new apartment, her boyfriend's family connections, then ask me if I was still playing with paint samples. When I mentioned I needed help with textbooks, just $300, she'd sigh dramatically and say they were already stretched thin with the mortgage and Stephanie's wedding planning. Stephanie's wedding! They spent $40,000 on that spectacle. I know because she made sure to tell me, repeatedly, while I was eating peanut butter sandwiches for dinner and washing my single pair of decent jeans in the dorm sink because I couldn't afford the laundromat that week. I remember one particularly brutal night in February, snow piling against my dorm window, the heating barely working. It was 2:15 in the morning, and I was simultaneously studying for a design history exam and calculating if I could afford both my phone bill and groceries that week. I couldn't. I chose the phone bill, thinking I might need to call home for help. When I finally broke down and called my mother the next day, voice shaking as I explained I hadn't eaten a real meal in 4 days, she said, "Rachel, you need to learn to manage your money better. Your father and I won't always be here to bail you out." They weren't there then, either, but I was too exhausted to point out the irony. The real breaking point came 3 years later, in the summer after graduation. I'd managed to finish my degree through sheer stubbornness, working sometimes 35 hours a week while maintaining my grades. The economy had tanked, and the design firms weren't hiring. The entry-level position I'd been promised evaporated 2 weeks before I was supposed to start. My student loans came due with the ruthlessness of a ticking bomb, $800 a month that might as well have been $8,000. I lost my apartment first. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday, giving me 72 hours to come up with 3 months of back rent. I called my father at his office, something I never did. His secretary put me through after making me wait 15 minutes. Dad, I need help. Just $2,000 to keep my apartment. I'll pay you back as soon as I find work. I promise. Rachel, you're 25 years old. You chose this path. Your mother and I can't keep enabling your poor decisions. His voice was clinical, detached, like he was declining a business proposal. Enabling you haven't given me a penny since freshman year. We gave you the gift of independence. Stephanie never needed to ask for handouts after college. Stephanie, who lived at home rent-free for 2 years after graduation. Stephanie, whose car was a graduation gift. Stephanie, whose wedding they'd just finished paying for. I moved into a roach-infested studio in the worst part of East Cleveland, the kind of place where you heard gunshots at night and pretended they were fireworks. I sold everything I could, my laptop, my design books, even the watch my grandmother had left me. I was working 3 jobs, 4 in the morning to noon at a warehouse, 2 in the afternoon to 6 at a grocery store, 7 at night to 11 cleaning offices downtown. The text from Stephanie came while I was scrubbing toilets at some investment firm, my knees aching against the cold tile. It was 11:45 at night, and my phone buzzed against the cleaning cart. Mom told me you asked Dad for money. Pretty pathetic. Rach, maybe if you'd studied something useful instead of playing artist, you wouldn't be in this mess. Stop embarrassing the family. I stared at that message until the screen went dark. Then I kept cleaning, tears mixing with the industrial disinfectant. 2 weeks later, desperate and down to my last $17, I swallowed what remained of my pride and went to my parents' house. I took 3 buses to get there, walked the last mile in shoes held together with duct tape. It was a Sunday afternoon. I could see them through the window, my parents, Stephanie, and her husband sitting around the dining room table, laughing over what looked like an elaborate spread of food. I rang the doorbell. My mother answered, her face shifting from surprise to annoyance in seconds. Rachel, you look. She trailed off, taking in my appearance. I'd lost 20 pounds I couldn't afford to lose. My clothes hung off me like rags. Mom, please, I just need enough for food. Anything. I haven't eaten in 2 days. We're in the middle of Sunday dinner. This is inappropriate. She glanced back nervously, as if afraid the neighbors might see me on her doorstep. I'm your daughter. And you're making a scene. Rachel, you need to take responsibility for your life. Coming here like this, looking like this. What would people think? She started to close the door. I put my hand out to stop it, and she actually recoiled from me. From behind her, I heard Stephanie's voice. Is that Rachel God? Tell her to get some dignity. My mother looked at me one last time. Don't come here again like this. It's embarrassing. The door clicked shut. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the bronze knocker I used to reach for as a child, back when this house meant safety and love. Then I walked away. Those 3 buses and 1 mile back to my roach-infested reality. That night, sitting on my mattress on the floor, eating a single packet of ramen I'd stolen from the grocery store where I worked, I made myself a promise I would never ask them for anything again, and if they ever came asking me for something, after what they'd done, I would make them feel every ounce of the abandonment they'd inflicted on me. I deleted their numbers from my phone, changed my email, disappeared from their lives as thoroughly as they disappeared from mine when I needed them most. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Rock bottom, I learned, is a solid foundation to build on. It started with a chance encounter at the office building where I cleaned nights. Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, 73 years old and sharp as cut glass, was working late in her law firm's office when she found me studying design magazines I'd fished out of the recycling. It was 1:30 in the morning, and I was supposed to be mopping. "Shh, you're reading Architectural Digest while cleaning toilets," she asked, amused rather than angry. "I have a degree in interior design," I admitted, too exhausted to lie. "Just can't seem to use it." She hired me to redesign her powder room. Just that, one tiny room in her massive Shaker Heights home. She paid me $500, which might as well have been 5 million. More importantly, she told her book club about me. Those women, all in their 70s and 80s, became my first clients. Small projects, a reading nook here, a guest bedroom there. They paid fairly and on time, and they didn't care that I showed up in thrift store clothes or that my office was a corner table at the public library. I kept all 3 jobs while building my design practice. 4 hours of sleep became my norm. My studio apartment's floor was covered in fabric samples and paint chips I'd collected from dumpsters behind design stores. I taught myself CAD software using tutorials at the library, practiced sketching perspectives during my breaks at the warehouse. The breakthrough came 18 months later. Mrs. Hartley's granddaughter, a tech executive named Sarah, hired me to design her new condo. It was a big project, full renovation, unlimited budget. I worked on those plans like my life depended on it, because it did. Every detail was perfect, every measurement precise. I knew I'd only get one shot at the big leagues. Sarah's condo was featured in Cleveland Magazine. The photo spread didn't mention that I'd drawn the initial sketches on the back of grocery store receipts, or that I'd taken the initial measurements while fighting off a fever because I couldn't afford to be sick. Orders started coming in, real orders, from people with real money. I quit the warehouse job first, then the grocery store. I kept the cleaning job for 6 more months, not for the money, but for the reminder. Every toilet I scrubbed was fuel for my ambition. By year 3, I had enough for a security deposit on a proper studio space in Ohio City. It was small, just 400 square feet, but it had good light and room for a real drafting table. I found it at a second-hand shop, missing one leg that I replaced with design books stacked to the right height. I lived in that studio for a year, sleeping on a cot in the corner, showering at the gym, cooking on a hot plate. Every dollar went back into the business, better software, quality samples, professional photography of my work. I built a website myself, learning code from YouTube videos watched at 2 a.m. when insomnia and ambition wouldn't let me sleep. Year 5 brought my first commercial contract, a boutique hotel renovation in Gordon Square. The owner took a chance on me because my bid was lower than the established firms, but I would have done it for free just for the portfolio piece. I worked 20-hour days on that project, personally overseeing every installation, every fixture placement. When it opened, the plain dealer called it Cleveland's hidden gem and praised the innovative design that honors the building's history while embracing modern luxury. The phone didn't stop ringing after that. Restaurants, offices, high-end residences. I hired my first employee, then my second, moved into an actual apartment, nothing fancy, but it had a real bed and a kitchen with a stove that worked. I bought a car, used but reliable, and the first time I drove it instead of waiting for the bus, I cried for 10 minutes in the parking lot. Year 7. Monroe Design Associates moved into a converted warehouse space in the Flats, 2,500 square feet, exposed brick, views of the Cuyahoga River. I had 6 employees, a waiting list of clients, and a feature in Interior Design magazine. My bank account held more money than my parents had spent on Stephanie's wedding. I thought about calling them sometimes, especially on holidays when the success felt hollow without anyone to share it with. But then I'd remember my mother closing the door in my face, my father's cold voice dismissing me, Stephanie's cruel texts. The anger would reflare, keeping me warm through another lonely Christmas, another silent Thanksgiving. I built my empire on spite and instant ramen, on 3 hours of sleep and an endless well of rage. Every success was a middle finger to the family who'd written me off. Every client who praised my work was vindication for the girl who'd been told she was wasting her time with paint samples. I was ready for them to come crawling back. I'd been ready for years. The message came on a Thursday evening in October. I was reviewing proposals for a new restaurant project. My feet up on my desk, the Cleveland skyline glittering through my office windows. 7 years of silence. And then my mother's name appeared on my phone screen like a ghost materializing from thin air. I'd kept the same number all these years. Part of me, the part I hated acknowledging, had been waiting for this moment. Hi, sweetie, I know it's been a while, but family is family. Right, Dad and I have been talking, and we're planning the most wonderful family trip to Europe for the holidays: Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Can you imagine? We'd love for you to join us, the whole family together again. The thing is, with the economy and all, things are a bit tight. We were hoping you could help with the costs. About $50,000 should cover everyone. You're doing so well. Now we saw the magazine article, and what's money between family? Let me know soon. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Each reading made my hands shake harder, but not from nervousness, from pure, crystallized rage. 7 years, not a single "how are you," not one happy birthday, not even a congratulations when my work was featured in national publications. But now that they needed something, suddenly I was sweetie again. I set the phone down and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the dark water of Lake Erie. Somewhere out there in Shaker Heights, my family was probably sitting around their dining room table, planning their European adventure with my money already spent in their minds. The next morning, I did some research. Social media is a wonderful thing when you want to know what you've been excluded from. Stephanie's Facebook was a goldmine of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to: Thanksgivings, Christmases, birthdays, pictures of them smiling, toasting, living their perfect lives while I was eating ramen alone in my studio. My father had retired early, apparently. There were photos of him and my mother on a cruise to Alaska just 6 months ago. So much for things being tight. But the best discovery was Stephanie's recent posts complaining about her husband's failed business venture. They'd lost a significant amount of money. Apparently, her lifestyle posts had shifted from designer handbags to DIY home projects. The Europe trip wasn't just a vacation. It was their attempt to maintain appearances, to pretend they were still the successful Monroe family of Shaker Heights. And they expected me to fund their charade. I waited 2 days before responding. Let them sweat a little. Then I sent a carefully crafted message. Mom, how wonderful to hear from you after all these years. Europe sounds amazing. I'd love to discuss this in person. How about dinner this Saturday at Marble Room? My treat, of course. 8 o'clock. Bring Dad and Stephanie. We have so much to catch up on. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Of course they knew Marble Room. It was Cleveland's most exclusive steakhouse, the kind of place where dinner for 4 could easily run $2,000. They probably thought I was already opening my checkbook. I made the reservation under Monroe Design Associates, ensuring we'd get the best table. Then I called my assistant. Clear my schedule for Saturday evening, I told her, and call my accountant. I want a printed summary of my company's current valuation and my personal net worth. Have it delivered to Marble Room at exactly 9:15 on Saturday night. Celebrating something, she asked. More like ending something, I replied. I spent the rest of the week preparing. Not the money. I had no intention of giving them a penny, but I prepared my words, rehearsed them in the mirror like a closing argument. I thought about every night I went to bed hungry, every humiliation I'd endured, every door they'd closed in my face. I distilled 7 years of abandonment into sharp, precise sentences that would cut deeper than any knife. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, perfect weather for what was about to unfold. I dressed carefully, a custom-tailored suit that cost more than my father's monthly mortgage payment, shoes that cost more than they'd given me for my entire college career, a watch that cost more than that powder room renovation that had saved my life. Every piece was armor, each designer label a battle scar transformed into gold. I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early, watched them pull up in my father's aging BMW, the same one he'd been driving when he told me I was on my own. They'd dressed up, my mother in what was clearly a new dress, probably purchased specifically for this occasion. Stephanie wore her old designer pieces, the ones from before her husband's business failed. My father's suit was the same one he'd worn to Stephanie's wedding. They were trying so hard to look successful, to look like they deserved $50,000 for a European vacation. They had no idea they were walking into their own funeral. I watched them through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows as they approached. huddled under a shared umbrella. My mother spotted me first, waving enthusiastically as if we'd seen each other last week instead of 7 years ago. I raised my hand in acknowledgement, keeping my expression neutral. Professional. This was business now. The maitre d' escorted them to my table, the chef's table, actually, with a view of the entire dining room and the kitchen, the kind of table that screamed money and influence. I stood as they approached, noting how my mother's eyes widened at the setting, how Stephanie's jaw tightened with barely concealed envy. Rachel. Oh my goodness, look at you. My mother moved in for a hug. I stepped back, extending my hand instead. Mother, Father, Stephanie. I shook each hand formally, watching confusion flicker across their faces. Please, sit. The waiter appeared immediately with champagne, Dom Perignon, which I'd pre-ordered. My father's eyebrows rose at the label. Celebrating already? He asked, attempting jovially. We'll see, I replied, raising my glass. To family reunions. We clinked glasses, the crystal singing a false note of harmony. I'd instructed the waiter to bring the 7-course tasting menu without asking, paired wines with each course. Let them taste what success actually looked like. This place is incredible, my mother gushed, looking around at the original artwork, the soft jazz quartet in the corner. You must do very well to afford. I designed it, I interrupted quietly. The whole restaurant. The owner is a client. Stephanie's face went pale. The appetizers arrived, oysters flown in from Maine that morning, caviar service with traditional accompaniments. I watched them pretend this was normal for them, hiding their excitement behind practiced nonchalance. So, my father cleared his throat, always uncomfortable with pleasantries. Your mother mentioned our European plans? Yes, she did. I took a delicate sip of champagne. Tell me more about this trip. They launched into it eagerly, talking over each other. 3 weeks, first-class flights, 5-star hotels. My mother had already researched Michelin-starred restaurants. Stephanie wanted to shop in Milan. My father mentioned something about reconnecting as a family, his words sounding rehearsed. And you thought of me, I said, letting them hear the irony. Of course. My mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. We've always thought of you, sweetie. We wanted to give you space to grow. Space! I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. Is that what you call it? Rachel, Stephanie interjected, using her big sister voice. Let's not dwell on the past. We're here now. The 2nd course arrived, foie gras with a port wine reduction. I waited until they'd each taken a bite, watched the pleasure cross their faces. You're right, Stephanie. Let's talk about the present. Tell me, how's David's business? Her fork stopped midway to her mouth. We're restructuring. Restructuring? That's a nice word for bankruptcy, isn't it? How did you... And Dad, early retirement at 58. That's ambitious. Most engineers work until 65. Unless, of course, they were encouraged to leave. My father's face reddened. That's none of your... Business, no. It wouldn't be. Just like my business wasn't yours when I was sleeping on the floor of a studio infested with cockroaches. When I was stealing packets of sugar from coffee shops because I couldn't afford food. Rachel, please, my mother whispered, glancing around. People might hear... Oh, now you're concerned about appearances. Where was that concern when you shut the door in my face when I stood on your porch, visibly starving, and you called me an embarrassment? The waiter approached with the 3rd course. I smiled at him pleasantly, thanked him. The moment he left, I continued. But let's talk about this trip. $50,000. That's what you need from me. Hope flickered in their eyes. They thought I was considering it. Do you know what $50,000 would have meant to me 7 years ago? I asked conversationally, cutting into my perfectly seared scallops. It would have been everything. But do you know what I actually needed, $2,000? Just $2,000 to keep my apartment. I begged you, Dad. Do you remember what you said? He stared at his plate. You said I chose my path, that you wouldn't enable my poor decisions. I laughed, the sound sharp as crystal breaking. But here you are, asking me to enable yours. That's different, Stephanie started. How? Because you're family. I was family when I called Mom crying because I hadn't eaten in 4 days. I was family when I was working 3 jobs and destroying my body just to survive. Where was family then? The 4th course arrived. None of them were eating anymore, but I continued enjoying my meal. Each bite was a luxury I'd earned, each sip of wine a toast to my survival. The truth is, I said, dabbing my lips with the linen napkin, I could write you a check for $50,000 right now and not even notice it was gone. I spent more than that on a car last month. Their eyes lit up with hope again. It was almost endearing. How predictable they were. But I won't. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. The restaurant continued its elegant symphony around us, the soft clink of silverware, muted conversations, the jazz quartet transitioning into a melancholic rendition of Autumn Leaves. How appropriate. My mother was the first to recover, forcing a laugh that fooled no one. Rachel, sweetie, you're joking. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mother? She blinked rapidly, her carefully applied mascara starting to smudge. We raised you. We gave you a home, an education. You gave me the legally required minimum until I turned 18. The education I paid for that myself. With loans I'm still paying off despite having more money than I know what to do with. I keep paying them as a reminder. The 5th course arrived. Wagyu beef so tender it could be cut with a fork. The waiter poured a Chateau Margaux that probably cost more than my family's monthly grocery budget. I savored both the wine and their visible discomfort. This is ridiculous, Stephanie snapped, her composure finally cracking. You're being dramatic, as usual. So we had some tough times. I set down my fork carefully. Precisely. When did you ever have tough times? Stephanie. When Mom and Dad paid for your apartment after college, when they bought you a car for graduation, when they threw you that $40,000 wedding while I was eating 1 meal a day. That's not... Do you remember what you texted me when I asked Dad for help? You called me pathetic? Said I should have studied something useful. Tell me, how's that business degree working out now that David's company is gone? Her face flushed red, then white. My father tried to intervene. Rachel, that's enough. We're still your family. No, I said simply. Your relatives. Family shows up. Family helps. Family doesn't close doors in your face when you're starving. My mother was crying now, delicate tears that didn't disturb her makeup. She'd always been good at crying on cue. We thought we were teaching you to be independent. Stop! I held up my hand. Just stop. You want to know the truth? I used to dream about this moment, when I was cleaning toilets at 3 a.m, when I was walking 5 miles to work because I couldn't afford bus fare, when I was drawing design plans on napkins because I couldn't afford paper. I dreamed about the day you'd need me, and I could return the favor. The 6th course sat untouched in front of them, a delicate cheese soufflé that was deflating like their hopes. But you know what's funny? I continued, signaling the waiter for more wine. Now that it's here, I don't feel vindicated. I feel empty, because I realized something while building my company. Every success, every achievement, every milestone, I accomplished it to spite you, to prove you wrong, and that's no way to live. So you'll help us? My mother's voice was barely a whisper, hopeful. I laughed, genuinely this time. No, Mother, I'm done. This dinner, this is my goodbye gift to you, the last thing you'll ever receive from me. You can't be serious, my father said, his engineering mind trying to calculate a different outcome. 50,000 is nothing to you now. You're right, it's nothing. But do you know what $2,000 was to me 7 years ago? It was everything. It was dignity. It was survival. It was proof that my own parents gave a damn whether I lived or died. The dessert course was approaching. I could see the waiter preparing the flambé at a nearby station. The theatrical flames seemed appropriate for this funeral pyre of family relationships. "I've arranged something special for you," I said, checking my watch. It was 9:10. Perfect timing. "A little presentation with dessert." They exchanged glances, hope and confusion warring on their faces. Maybe they thought I'd arranged for a check, some grand gesture of forgiveness. The waiter arrived with the flaming dessert, setting it before us with a flourish. As the flames died down, my assistant appeared, right on schedule, carrying a leather portfolio. "Ms. Monroe," she said professionally, handing me the documents. "The financial summaries you requested." "Thank you, Jennifer." I opened the portfolio, spreading the papers on the table where they could all see. "I thought you should know exactly what you're walking away from tonight." The numbers were staggering, even to me sometimes. Monroe Design Associates valuation at $12 million. My personal net worth at $8.5 million. Investment portfolio. Real estate holdings. Projected earnings for the next 5 years. "This," I said, gesturing to the papers, "is what I built from nothing. From less than nothing. From the ashes of your abandonment." Stephanie reached for one of the sheets, her hand trembling. "This can't be real." "Oh, it's very real. As real as the hunger I felt. As real as the doors you closed. As real as the family vacations you took while I was drowning." My mother was sobbing now, mascara running in black streams down her cheeks. "Rachel, please. We made mistakes." "Yes, you did. And now you get to live with them." I stood up slowly, deliberately, smoothing my suit jacket. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Several nearby diners had given up pretending not to watch our table. The tears, the raised voices, the spread of financial documents like evidence in a trial. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice carrying the authority I'd earned in 1,000 boardrooms. "You came here tonight thinking I was still that desperate girl who begged for scraps, the one you could manipulate with guilt and false family sentiment. But that girl died 7 years ago, on your doorstep, when you chose your reputation over your daughter's survival." My father's face had gone gray. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, shoulders sagging under the weight of recognition. "Rachel, we didn't know what that I was struggling, I told you. Explicitly, repeatedly. Or didn't you know I'd succeed? That's the real tragedy. Isn't it you bet against me, and you lost?" I picked up one of the financial statements, holding it up to the light. "Do you see this number? 8.5 million? Do you know what I think about when I look at it? Not cars or houses or European vacations. I think about a girl eating stolen sugar packets in a coffee shop bathroom. I think about walking to work with plastic bags wrapped around my shoes because the soles had worn through. I think about you." Stephanie found her voice, desperate and angry. "So you brought us here to humiliate us, to rub our faces in your success." "No," I said simply. "I brought you here to show you what you threw away, to let you taste, literally, what it feels like to want something you'll never have." My mother reached out, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Rachel, you can't mean this. We're blood." "Blood." I pulled my hand away. "You want to talk about blood? I bled for everything I have. I bled dignity working jobs that destroyed my body. I bled hope every time I called and you didn't answer. I bled tears cleaning office buildings while people with half my talent got opportunities because they had family support." The waiter approached hesitantly with the check. Perfect timing. I'd instructed them to bring it at exactly 9:20. "And now," I continued, pulling out my Black American Express, "let me tell you exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to pay for this dinner, all $3,000 of it. Consider it a parting gift. You'll go home to Shaker Heights, back to your house with its mortgage you're struggling to pay, back to your life of keeping up appearances you can't afford." I signed the check with a flourish, adding a $1,000 tip. The waiter's eyes widened. "You'll plan some other way to fund your European fantasy. Maybe you'll take out loans. Maybe you'll sell something. Maybe you'll find some other relative to manipulate. But you won't get a penny from me. Not now. Not ever. You're really going to let us struggle? My father's voice cracked. After preaching about family abandonment, I'm going to do exactly what you taught me to do, I replied. I'm going to let you be independent. I'm going to let you learn to manage your money better. I'm going to give you the gift of figuring it out yourself. I gathered the financial documents, sliding them back into the portfolio. But here's the difference between you and me. I'm not pretending it's for your own good. I'm not dressing up cruelty as life lessons. I'm being honest. This is revenge. Pure, simple, served at exactly the right temperature. You'll regret this, Stephanie spat. When you're alone with your money and no family. I've been alone for 7 years, I interrupted. The only difference is now I'm alone in a 5-bedroom house instead of a roach-infested studio, alone with a successful company instead of 3 dead-end jobs, alone by choice instead of abandonment. My mother made one last attempt, her voice small and broken. Rachel, I'm sorry. We're sorry. Can't we start over? I paused at that, letting them think for just a moment that their apology might matter. Then I shook my head. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry I succeeded despite it. You're sorry you can't access my money. You're sorry the daughter you wrote off as a failure is now worth more than your entire social circle combined. I picked up my coat from the chair, slipping it on with practiced ease. Here's what I know about sorry. It doesn't pay rent. It doesn't buy food. It doesn't keep the lights on. It's just a word people use when they want something. The jazz quartet was playing The Way You Look Tonight. The irony wasn't lost on me. They looked destroyed. My mother's makeup was ruined. My father seemed to have aged a decade in an hour, and Stephanie's carefully constructed superiority had crumbled like old plaster. Enjoy the rest of your dessert, I said, gesturing to the untouched flambé. It's excellent. And don't worry about trying to contact me again. I'll be changing my number tomorrow. My attorney will send you a formal cease and desist if you try to reach out through my company. I took one last look at them, this family that had never really been mine. You know what the saddest part is. If you'd given me that $2,000 7 years ago, I would have given you anything today. 50,000, 100,000, whatever you needed. But you taught me that family is conditional. So here's my condition. Leave me alone. I walked away from that table with the same measured pace I'd learned in boardrooms, where showing emotion was weakness and weakness was death. My heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown to their final moment of hope. 3 steps. 4. 5. I could feel their eyes burning into my back, willing me to turn around, to show some crack in my resolve. I didn't. The maitre d' held the door for me with a knowing nod. He'd seen enough family dramas play out in his restaurant to recognize a final act when he witnessed one. Outside, the October rain had stopped, leaving Cleveland's streets gleaming under the streetlights like a city washed clean. My car was waiting, the BMW M8 I'd bought last month, midnight blue with an interior that smelled like new leather and vindication. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, watching through the restaurant window as my family remained frozen at the table, surrounded by the wreckage of their expectations. My mother had collapsed forward, her face in her hands. My father stared at the financial documents I'd left behind like they were written in a foreign language. Stephanie was gesticulating wildly, probably trying to salvage some narrative where she wasn't the villain in her own story. I started the engine, the purr of German engineering drowning out any last whispers of doubt. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror through the window. 3 people who'd just learned that some bridges, once burned, leave nothing but ash. The drive home took me through the city I'd conquered, past the offices I'd designed, the restaurants where I was known by name, the building where I'd once cleaned toilets that now bore a plaque with my company's name as the renovation architect. Every streetlight was a small victory, every mile a testament to what spite and determination could build. My phone buzzed at a red light, a text from an unknown number, Probably Stephanie using someone else's phone. You're a monster. I deleted it without responding and blocked the number. Tomorrow, I'd change mine as promised. Tomorrow, I'd instruct my lawyers to prepare those cease and desist letters. Tomorrow, I'd continue building my empire on the foundation of their abandonment. But tonight, I drove home to my house in Tremont, a restored Victorian I'd bought and renovated myself. Every room a masterpiece of design and a middle finger to poverty. I poured myself a glass of wine that cost more than a week of those old ramen dinners and stood at my floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. The grandfather clock in my foyer struck 10:30. Somewhere in Shaker Heights, my family was probably driving home in silence, each lost in their own spiral of regret and resentment. They'd spend the next weeks, months, maybe years, telling anyone who'd listen about their ungrateful daughter, the one who'd forgotten where she came from. But I hadn't forgotten. I remembered everything. Every hungry night, every declined call, every closed door. I'd carved those memories into my bones, used them as blueprints for the life I'd built. They were the fuel that powered my late nights, the voice that whispered, "Keep going," when everyone else had gone home. I raised my glass to my reflection in the window, to the girl who'd survived on sugar packets and spite, who'd built a fortune from nothing but fury and talent. To family, I said to the empty room, the word tasting like expensive wine and sweet revenge, the one you choose, not the one you're born into. My phone buzzed again, this time, a client confirming our Monday meeting about a new hotel project. Life would go on, business would continue, success would be the only revenge that mattered. I thought about the $50,000 they'd wanted. By the time I was done with my next project, I'd make that in a week. And they'd know it. They'd see my name in magazines, hear about my success from friends, drive past buildings I'd designed. Every accomplishment would be a reminder of what they'd thrown away for the price of their pride. Some might call me cold, heartless, unforgiving. They'd be right. But I'd learned from the best teachers, a mother who valued appearances over her daughter's survival, a father who preached independence while playing favorites, a sister who kicked me when I was down. They'd taught me that love was conditional, family was transactional, and the only person you could count on was yourself. The rain started again, gentle drops painting patterns on my windows. I finished my wine and headed upstairs to my home office, where sketches for a new project waited. There was always another building to design, another success to achieve. Another level to reach that would take me further from that desperate girl eating stolen sugar packets. But I'd never forget her. She was my origin story, my reminder, my motivation. She was the ghost that haunted every success, the shadow that made the light seem brighter. As I settled at my drafting table, I thought about my family one last time. They'd wanted Europe, Paris, Rome, Barcelona. Instead, they'd gotten a $3,000 meal and a lesson in consequences. They'd tasted what they'd never have, seen what they'd thrown away, felt what it was like to need something from someone who'd learned not to give. The clock struck 11. Time to work, time to build, time to continue becoming everything they said I'd never be. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't a dish best served cold. It was best served at exactly the right temperature, with a side of financial statements and a vintage wine, in a restaurant you designed yourself, wearing a suit that cost more than they'd ever given you, with a smile that never quite reached your eyes. And as the rain continued to fall over Cleveland, washing the city clean for another day, I picked up my pencil and began to draw. Another building, another success, another reminder that the best revenge isn't living well, it's living well without them. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had to cut toxic family members from your life? How did you handle it? Let's discuss in the comments.